Chapter 10. Theories on the Origin of Women's Oppression. Introduction. The question of how women's oppression began and why it persists remains one of the most debated topics across psychology, anthropology, sociology, religion, and cultural studies. Scholars have approached the issue from multiple lenses. Some argue that gender inequality is rooted in unconscious psychological processes. Others trace its beginnings to shifts in economic and social structures, while still others highlight how institutions and culture continually reinforce subordination. Religion and sacred texts, particularly their interpretations and mistranslations, have also played a central role in justifying inequality. Psychological theories. Psychological explanations for women's oppression focus on how identity, behavior, and unconscious processes reproduce gender inequality. According to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on psychoanalytic feminism, Sigmund Freud's psychoanalysis defined femininity in relation to masculinity, describing women as lacking a penis and suggesting that girls develop penis envy while boys experience castration anxiety. This framework has been criticized for portraying women as incomplete or subordinate to men. For instance, in anime like Neon Genesis Evangelion, Asuka Langley Soryu struggles with feelings of inadequacy compared to her male counterparts. Reflecting how internalized notions of lack can shape self-identity and reinforce stereotypes, from the study of Karen Horney, we learn that Freud's ideas reflected the patriarchal culture of his time rather than universal truths. Horney countered with the idea of womb envy, suggesting that men may, in fact, envy women's reproductive power. Developmental psychology also emphasizes how children internalize gender norms through socialization. Bandura's social learning theory shows that behaviors are reinforced by rewards and punishments. Girls are encouraged to be nurturing while boys are praised for aggression. This can be seen in Naruto, where Sakura is often sidelined to supportive or healing roles, while Naruto and Sasuke are rewarded for combat and ambition. These portrayals mirror how real-world reinforcement limits women's opportunities and shapes their sense of self. The strength of psychological theories lies in their ability to show how oppression is reproduced internally, in the minds of both women and men. However, their weakness is the tendency toward biological determinism and neglect of larger social structures. Still, the psychological lens helps us understand why women sometimes internalize inequality, mistaking it for natural or inevitable. Anthropological theories. Anthropological explanations look across cultures and histories to examine how patriarchy developed. According to Cynthia Eller's The Myth of Matriarchal Prehistory, the idea of a prehistoric golden age where women ruled is more of a projection of modern feminist hopes than an archaeological reality. However, anthropologists have studied societies with matrilineal descent, like the Minangkabau in Indonesia. From the study of Peggy Reeves Sandy, we learn that while Minangkabau women control property and inheritance, political and ritual leadership still often falls to men, showing the complexity of power structures. This resonates with anime like Inuyasha, where priestesses like Kikyo wield spiritual authority, but male warriors and feudal lords dominate military and political power. Friedrich Engels, in his classic work The Origin of the Family, Private Property, and the State, argued that women's subordination began when private property and inheritance became central. Men sought to ensure paternity certainty to pass wealth to their sons, which led to controlling women's sexuality and reproduction. This anthropological economic explanation is echoed in anime such as Attack on Titan, where families with noble bloodlines carefully control marriage and reproduction to preserve power and inheritance, often sidelining women's agency. From the study of evolutionary anthropologists, we also see arguments that male competition and reproductive strategies played a role in shaping patriarchy. Environmental shifts, from hunting and gathering to agriculture, gave men greater control over surplus and warfare, consolidating power. Anthropological perspectives remind us that women's oppression is not universal or timeless but emerged in specific historical and ecological contexts. Sociological theories emphasize that women's oppression is systemic, embedded in structures of power, economy, and ideology. Conflict theory, influenced by Marx, argues that just as classes are in conflict, so too are genders. According to Lise Vogel in Marxism and the Oppression of Women, women's unpaid domestic labor under capitalism ensures the reproduction of the labor force while being undervalued and invisible. This can be illustrated through Fruits Basket, where the female characters often carry the emotional labor of their cursed family, supporting the men while sacrificing their own desires, a metaphor for women's invisible work sustaining society. Radical feminism, on the other hand, locates the origin of oppression not in capitalism but in patriarchy itself. Men's domination of women, particularly control over their bodies and sexuality, is seen as the most fundamental system of inequality. A parallel can be seen in the Handmaid's Tale-inspired anime settings such as Yona of the Dawn, where women are valued primarily for reproduction or political marriage, and men control access to power and resources. Intersectional feminism, developed by scholars like Patricia Hill Collins, emphasizes that women's oppression cannot be separated from race, class, or sexuality. Social constructionism adds that gender is not biologically fixed but shaped by culture and institutions. Anime such as Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood highlights this idea through characters like Olivier Armstrong, who defies traditional gender roles in a male-dominated military, showing that gender expectations are constructed and can be resisted. Religion and women's oppression. Religion has historically provided both the justification for and resistance to women's oppression. According to Aisha Hidayatullah's feminist tafsir, patriarchal interpretations of the Quran often overshadow the egalitarian principles originally present in Islam. Similarly, in Christianity, passages like Ephesians 5 and 1 Timothy 2 have been cited to argue for women's subordination. From the study of feminist theologians, we learn that these interpretations often reflect the patriarchal cultures of translators and clergy rather than the texts themselves. Anime often reflects the oppressive role of religion. In Made in Abyss, the Orthodox Church hierarchy controls truth and morality. And young girls are often sacrificed for the greater good, reflecting how religious institutions sometimes demand women's subordination in the name of divine will. At the same time, feminist theology shows religion can also be reinterpreted for liberation, much like characters in anime who resist oppressive religious systems to reclaim dignity and justice. Biblical mistranslations. Mistranslations of biblical texts have been powerful tools for reinforcing women's subordination. For example, Ephesians 5 verse 22 has often been rendered as wives, submit to your husbands, even though the original Greek lacks the verb submit in that verse. The instruction should be read in light of 5:21, which calls for mutual submission. According to Kalinda Rose Stevenson, such translation choices lost the vision of equality in marriage. Similarly, 1 Timothy 2 verses 11 to 12, where the Greek word hesukia means quietness or peacefulness, has often been mistranslated as silence, implying women must be mute in church. The Hebrew word ezer in Genesis, traditionally translated as helper, is used elsewhere to describe God as Israel's strong helper, yet in Genesis it has been framed as subordinate. From the study of tribal women theologians, Brill, 2022, these mistranslations reflect male dominance in biblical scholarship. In anime terms, it is like how translations of Japanese works sometimes erase or distort strong female characters. For instance, early English dubs of Sailor Moon downplayed its feminist elements, making Sailor Uranus and Sailor Neptune cousins instead of partners, showing how mistranslation can erase women's power and agency. Cultural oppression. Culture also perpetuates oppression through norms and traditions. Practices like child marriage, purdah, or female genital mutilation are cultural mechanisms of control. According to a study on intimate partner violence in Bangladesh, AR14, 2021, women's acceptance of violence is linked to deeply ingrained cultural norms about male authority. Cultural oppression is vividly represented in anime like Princess Mononoke, where Lady Eboshi challenges traditional gender roles by leading an ironworks community of women, but is vilified by traditionalists as a dangerous threat to the natural and social order. Cultural oppression also operates subtly through expectations about women's roles in family and society. In Your Lie in April, Kaori's talent is consistently seen through her ability to inspire male protagonists, rather than her own musical genius. This reflects how women in many cultures are judged by their supportive roles rather than their independent achievements. Conclusion: the origins of women's oppression are multi-layered. Psychological theories help explain internalized inferiority and the reproduction of roles through unconscious processes and socialization. Anthropological theories show how patriarchy emerged in tandem with property, economy, and kinship systems. Sociological theories highlight systemic, structural inequality reinforced by ideology and institutions. Religion, through both interpretation and mistranslation, has often been a legitimizing force for subordination, though it also contains resources for resistance. Culture continues to sustain inequality, both in visible traditions and in subtle expectations, like the struggles depicted in anime narratives. Women's oppression is not one-dimensional but complex, involving overlapping systems of power. Just as anime heroes resist oppressive worlds, women and allies continue to challenge these structures in real life, pushing for equality not as an abstract ideal but as a lived reality.